So just getting started. My name is Kris. Thanks for the introduction. From Seattle, we at Atomic Infotech is our company, and we help. We're a software development and consulting company that helps multi-unit retailers leverage technology and data. And so, a lot of what we do is kind of solve the problem that we're going to talk about today. So, really, the gist of what I'll be talking about today is everybody in this room is kind of the information elite. We have a lot of different communication tools that we can use when we need to talk to our teammates. So whether it's email, chat, SMS, we all have smartphones, we all have computers given to us by our company probably, and we certainly all have email addresses. But this is actually not something that's common for hourly employees. So it's almost without exception, hourly employees are not given a company computer, so they're sharing a computer with other people. They might not have email addresses. It's not super common and universal to have email addresses. Definitely are unlikely to see a smartphone in the hands of a hourly or worker. So, as you can imagine, if you don't have these tools that we all use day to day, it's pretty tough to do your job without these tools. It leads to, I just don't know how I could do it. I mean, we would be constantly miscommunicating, missing out on great opportunities to improve. We just wouldn't be operating effectively as a team. So that's the problem that we're going to talk about, and it's a big problem. Roughly 60% of Americans are actually hourly or part-time employees. So we're talking about the lion's share of American workers are not necessarily in this information elite class that maybe the people in the room here are. And indeed, if we look at even the most common jobs in America, almost all of them, or all of them, at least in the top 10, are going to be hourly folks. So, I mean, like, developers not on this list, chief marketing officers not on this. I mean, you see a lot of, most of the top few are actually retail. Salespeople, cashiers, food service, all kind of in that retail space. So for the purposes of this talk, we're actually going to talk mostly about retail workers, because I think it's easy for us to all kind of relate to. I don't know if anybody here has maybe at some point in their career, possibly earlier in their career, has anybody worked in retail before? All right. It's a pretty common thing even for folks that are in the technology industry. And it's a monster industry. 1 in 10 American workers work in retail. Bricks beat clicks by a ratio of 9 to 1. This blows me away that still 90% of stuff that's being bought, maybe not by me, but Americans in general, is being bought in stores. So it's a huge, huge industry. Maybe the biggest. So what we're going to talk about is how are companies currently communicating? Why can't we use some of these traditional things that maybe we use in our day-to-day lives? And then what are some techniques and strategies that we're using to solve the problem? So currently, faxing is still a thing, and this always blows a lot of people away that, I haven't touched a fax machine in years, but in retail, they still use it a lot. You usually don't have individual email accounts for everybody in the company. There's just thousands of workers. It's really hard to do that. So you might see stores or locations sharing emails either by role or for the whole company. A lot of printed materials, 3-ring binders, you see those. Training materials get handed out like that a lot. And face-to-face meetings, especially if you're spread across many cities and states, it's really hard to get everybody into the same room at the same time. It's just sort of, it happens, but it's infrequent. And of course, conference calls and video conferencing is being used, but it doesn't solve all the problems. So you may be wondering a little bit about why isn't email prevalent in retail? Well, cost is certainly part of it. It's ranges between maybe $5 to $15 a month per user, but that's not even really the primary reason. A lot of it has to do with turnover and management. So in retail, turnover averages about 65% annually. So what that means is if you've got 1,000 people, 650 of them will have come and gone in a year period. So if you can imagine, if you're IT or you're HR, you're literally going to be onboarding and offboarding people every day, and so that becomes a major problem. It's one more system that you have to manage. But even maybe more fundamentally, is that email is a very personal thing, and it's not really designed to be used on a shared computer. So if you're in a retail environment and you're sharing a computer at a front counter, it's really hard to have any sort of confidential communication. And of course, even if we have it universally, it still doesn't solve a lot of the problems about transparency, making sure that the messages are received and responded and dealt with. So we also leverage a lot of enterprise communication tools as software developers, Slack, HipChat, Dropbox, that sort of things. And these don't work for a lot of the same reasons email doesn't work. Cost, provisioning, turnover, that sort of stuff, new employees. But not designed for the same computer, but also they almost full stop require email addresses. So if you're a company that hasn't universally adopted this for every one of your workers, it's super hard to use any of the existing enterprise collaboration tools. So one of the things that's actually kind of, I think, really surprised me when I learned about this is probably everybody in this room is a salaried worker, full-time. And so we don't always get, I don't have to punch a time card, and I don't get paid overtime. So when you're not kind of used to thinking about things that way, you have to understand that hourly employees are a totally different model. So while you're working and you're hourly, you are on the clock. Your employer has to pay you for your time. Seems obvious, but this becomes really tough when you're trying to use collaboration tools or you're trying to use things like smartphones. When I'm at home, if I'm an hourly employee and I'm checking email and I'm responding to my manager, am I on the clock? I mean, probably, but there's no mechanism necessarily to record those work hours and making sure that we're in compliance as a company with making sure that people are getting paid when they work. So a lot of things we have to be really careful about how we handle off-site work. So what are some approaches that we're taking to kind of solve some of these problems? I have to give you a little bit of an introduction about what we do at Atomic. We try to help big companies communicate even better than small ones. And we do this with a social internet we call Core. And it does some things like real-time communications. So we try to solve a lot of the problems that Slack or HipChat or FlowDoc would solve for knowledge workers, but try to bring that to the hourly or retail worker. And this helps them solve a lot of the things that email is not necessarily really got great at. A good example would be, say you have this actually happened with one of our clients. They have perishable products. And so when a customer comes in and says, hey, I bought this at your store and I found that it was spoiled or moldy, how do you get that communication from the people that are at the front line and get it to the folks in the support roles that can help solve that problem across all the stores? We have to identify, is this a one-off, random problem, or is this a systematic problem that we're dealing with at 50 locations and potentially can either make people sick or cause a health problem? So by being able to communicate in real time or near real time to both people in support roles, but also people in the same role in different locations to collaborate and solve a problem, we can cut to the chase and we can see what's going on really quickly. So real-time communication is a big part of that tool, even better than email in a lot of ways. Document sharing, of course, there's a lot of gaps in being able to collaborate without a tool that's designed for a shared environment and people that don't have email. Blogging, kind of self-explanatory. Task management is a really great one where we can help do things that, again, email is not always enough. It can be one thing if you say, hey, we need to do this checklist at all of our locations to make sure that we're rolled out for like a spring promotion. But how do you make sure that that's actually being implemented across all your locations? Well, by publishing shared tasks and then being able to see and track the progress that's happening, staff and management can make sure that they're doing the things that they need to be doing, and management can follow up and make sure everything's going to plan. Likewise, reporting. There's a lot of great reporting tools out there for, like, say, social media, as this example would be. But they're usually designed for analysts or people in a specific department. And it can be really hard when you have, people at a corporate office that have great reporting tools. But the people at the front line may not have great reporting tools, and they may not even have access to those tools. So we try to disseminate that information out to as many people, the people that can actually take action on the information. We also think it's really important to stop treating employees like lines on a spreadsheet. And so putting names to faces and recognizing exceptional performance by teams and individuals through directories and gamification and badges, we think that's a big part of making a team feel more cohesive, feel like a more tightly knit, close team. So some of the more tactical approaches, that's sort of kind of big picture of what we've done at Atomic with Core, but more tactically and maybe would apply to if you're developing products for hourly and part-time employees, these are maybe some more things that you have to ask yourself. And this is some of the things we had to ask ourselves. So like, do we actually need email in order to get our jobs done and provide a great tool? Not necessarily. What are we using it for? Things like password resets, authentication. There's other ways we can do that. Twilio SMS is a great example. We can have other ways besides requiring an email and still provide the sort of app integration features that we come to expect. So yeah, use alternative out-of-band. Consider collecting personal email. And this kind of goes part and parcel with also collect mobile numbers so that we have alternative ways to contact people. I know Zenefits is actually doing a pretty good job of this, is they understand that not every company is the same, and that they may need to be able to contact people either before or after they're onboarded even. So we need to have some of their personal contact information, not just their work email or work contact. Again, using Twilio SMS or IP messaging is a big part. So you really just have to think, I think the moral of that story is really think a little bit about why we're doing stuff, not just rote implementation of standard things that every company is doing. Real-time communication, and we're using Twilio IP messaging for a lot of this stuff. It really helps us bridge the gap between what email is capable of, or maybe the gap what we don't get with email or we don't get with having some of these other tools. So it allows us to do things like, obviously chat is probably the easiest use case, but beyond that there's notifications that, hey, there's an action you need to take, or you know, kind of bringing it, it's not just to replace email, but also to augment kind of those collaboration tools. And we're really excited about the video and voice integrations that we will be able to do with Twilio, with Twilio's voice and video SDK, because we'll be able to do a lot of that like Hangout style integration, where if you need to fire up, if chat's not working, we fire up a video conference. You can talk to your IT guy, you can talk to HR, you can get the support you need with your whoever you need to talk to, or get a group of people together really easily. So the other thing we had to think about a little differently is sort of that shared computing model. I know that's a really weird thing. I can't imagine anybody using my computer and sharing it, but it's common. So, you know, we had to look at things like, how can we make it really easy to switch users? Gmail does a pretty good job of this. I don't know if, you know, contextually this makes sense for me. I have a personal email and a professional email, and they make it pretty easy for me to switch between those. And so we kind of used a lot of that kind of thought processes, you know, looking for examples of great ways to do kind of a different paradigm or different model. Again, making it easy to log in, log out. We potentially have to use shorter timeouts so that, you know, confidential information is not on the screen that shouldn't be seen by certain folks. And then the other thing is, you know, when you're developing an app, if you don't think that solving the easy switching and the easy login and kind of, you know, a lot of point of sale vendors, if we go to a restaurant, you see they swipe, you know, they have the little card swipe. That's another alternative way of doing it, where they're literally authenticating before every time they do something on the computer. So it's, if that's, web apps don't traditionally do that. So, you know, I get that. I think it's not the worst thing in the world to just understand that your app may be shared by multiple people. So if you use role accounts, so you say, hey, these are your managers, these are your, you know, frontline people that are your sales associates, or that they are going to be shared accounts. Just understanding that might be the way people use the app. That has some implications if you're using a per user pricing model, but it's just another way of thinking of the problem. I think another one that people kind of don't, we touched on it earlier, but I don't know if the scale of it really hits home, but you know, when you've got hundreds of employees coming and going all the time, it's a big deal to onboard a new employee with every system, you know, your point of sale system, your HR system, and then your communication tools. So just understanding that turnover is a really big deal, and providing tools for people that are going to manage this to make it really easy for them. So if it's bulk import or helping determine when we've got crusty old users that haven't been around in 6 months and be able to deprovision those, or even better would be if you can integrate with an HR system or a payroll system, that would be your single point of truth. That used to be really hard with stuff like legacy providers like ADP, where they didn't really have the APIs that we all use now and kind of come to rely on from cloud providers. Companies like Zenefits, they've got a great API. So you can really leverage some of these software as a service companies that have these great APIs to help maybe even automatically provision employees and users. And then I think you also got to kind of understand your market. In enterprise software, you can kind of count on Active Directory being a great place to go and say, hey, is this person authorized to use this service? You just can't count on that in retail. It's much more common in a knowledge worker environment to see that. And so just understanding like, oh, we'll solve this with Active Directory. You're not going to see the penetration, unfortunately. Maybe I think some of the really, really big retailers probably do have some sort of directory that you could tap into or Google Apps, but I wouldn't count on it. So kind of a recap. We know staff are struggling to communicate. We know that even if they have tools like email and stuff, it's just still not enough. And then we know that we can engineer around this problem. We're just getting started with seeing what we can do. Really curious to see if anybody is in this industry and kind of some of the struggles you're facing and solutions that you're coming up with. I'd love to hear about it. But I want to kind of close out with a little anecdote that really kind of inspired us to do a lot of the real-time communication tools that we've been working on. And it comes down to this composition notebook. Walked into one of our clients is a company called Mudbay, and they're great. They're for healthy dogs and cats, and a lot of times you'll see a lot of their newer locations are right next to Whole Foods. So when you're getting kale and you're getting all your superfoods and stuff, you just walk right next door and into Mudbay, and you do the same thing for your dog and your cat. And they're just a great retailer. But I noticed that when I was in there one time, they had one of those composition notebooks on the counter, and I asked them, what's the composition notebook about? Just kind of curious. And they told me that, mind you, this is a client that's been working with us for about 5 years. And we've built a lot of really great communication tools that they use, but we didn't realize that there's still a lot of places we haven't solved the pain. And they told me that they use this notebook as a way of communicating in the same building between people that might even be in the exact same role. So it kind of blew my mind that there could be somebody that works literally in the same building, maybe parks in the same parking spot, and is having a hard time communicating with somebody that just might work in the evening and they work in the morning. So they use that notebook as a log, like a captain's log. This is the Mudbay team. To communicate the morning shift to the evening shift and what's going on in the store. And I love this too because they actually wrote like analog emojis and stuff that they use. They're just a really fun group. But it's just operational things that everybody in the building needed to know, and there wasn't a great way. So we really wanted to, we realized that was instantly, of course, that was a problem, and that we can solve it by using better tools like IP messaging and real-time communications. So that's the talk. I appreciate everybody coming out. If you have any questions, again, I'm really interested to hear if anybody else is experiencing these problems or solving it or in that industry. I'll be out in the hallway a little later, and happy to talk to anybody. Thank you.